Hey folks, what up? Back to the Shadow Zone, back to the Nerdcast with Scarlett once more.
Hey everyone!
Oh god, so we're both anthropologists.
I would say so, yeah.
Okay, here's a question for you. What came first, the monomyth or the culture?
So I would say...
Archetype or the culture?
I would say the culture. I think that as long as humans have been alive, we've been telling ourselves stories to affirm our own culture and identity. So I think the culture comes first.
Yeah, but here's the thing. When it comes to archetypes, how do these appear out of nowhere? That's where I come from, you know? As a hermeticist, as someone who's a mystic, I don't look at the question how, I look at the question why. Like, when did we start having these thoughts? Where do they come from, you know? What's your take? Like,
in terms of, like, why do we behave
symbolic
in a
thinking,
certain way?
having morals, having values, and, like, having codes of honor, having our customs. Where did that come from, in your opinion?
I think it's really interesting because we can see some similarities between all cultures, that all cultures have some form of morals, but how those morals look completely varies.
Oh, yeah.
So I think, I don't know if I have a really good answer for why we all have some kind of system of morality, but it's interesting that we do.
We all have, like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not do all this crap. Every culture has basic rules that we all follow, you know? And
although some don't even subscribe to, like, killing is wrong. Like, you look at certain, like, Norse culture that sees, like, death as a great victory.
Valhalla, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once again, the area you're in determines your cultural values.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for the Vikings, the Norse people, I mean, war was a way of life. It was a cold, brutal wilderness, and that created everything in their worldview, their religion, you know? And once again, environment creates the religion and culture you believe in, you know?
I think that the literal geography does really influence culture. Like, what are the weather conditions? What do you need to do to survive?
Right. I mean, I'm going to sound a bit dorky here, but as a theist, I think archetypes are sign that there's something... It's not just biological evolution. There's something that just clicked. Some cosmic event happened, and the brain was turned on in a certain way, you know?
Like the Stone Age theory, kind of?
Or
are you familiar with that?
More like the Force touched humanity, okay? Something along those lines. We get my drift.
So, like, you think that at some point we weren't spiritual beings, and then we became spiritual beings?
We gained symbolic thinking, true symbolic thinking, true beyond just my survival ambitions. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here?
I mean, that's a good point. Like, thinking about language, the development of something that represents something, but isn't the thing itself.
Yeah, well, I'm talking mostly as a theist. You can call it God, the Force, collective consciousness. Collective consciousness, I think, is what we should really be calling this. At some point, collective consciousness kicked in. It turned on. How it happened, who knows, you know?
Right. Yeah, and I remember taking biological anthropology classes that asked that question, and we don't really have an answer of where did this spiritual side of ourselves come from.
Well, it's not spiritual. It's like taking value. That could be another thing, like valuing your kin, valuing your tribe, you know, valuing this little object that looks weird. I'm going to start carving it and wear it around my neck, you know?
Right, art. Right, exactly. Something that isn't just survival-based.
Right.
It's not food, reproduction,
survival.
survival.
No, we've both taken Professor George Christensen's class.
Yes.
I like his stuff. You took him here at MATC. I did too this past year. He was actually my first college professor I ever had back at EW Baraboo. And you remember that line he always said, what the forbidden fruit is? The discovery of agriculture. That's the fruit of knowledge. That's what it is. You lived in communion with nature. Now you shall plow the fields. You know what I'm getting at. You've taken his class. What's your take?
On that idea that agriculture was the thing that set us apart?
Yeah.
So I actually kind of disagree. I think agriculture was bad for society. That's my hot take.
I agree with you. I agree.
And I think for me at least, it's because that's where this idea of ownership began. Like the ownership of the land. And then we see, like, discrimination against women because suddenly women needed to be property, children needed to be existing.
Mad Max,
You know, so I think in a lot of ways it introduced some really negative aspects into human culture.
Yeah, I agree. And hunter-gatherer societies, like, here's the thing we'll get into next, egalitarianism there's all this debate, a lot of, like, contemporary thinkers will say, like, before the rise, the modern day period of Rome, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, or like before we entered like the, sort of like 2,000 years ago, we lived in this perfect like egalitarian society. Like everything was like there were no codes or like, you know what I mean? Mythologizing something that really didn't even exist. Because in my understanding of like ancient cultures, like nomadic cultures, it was based if you had the ability. If you had the ability, we didn't care what gender, race, or whatever you were, if you could do the work, you could do hunting regardless of your gender. You could be the chief regardless of your gender. How do you feel about that? What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, from what I know, and I'm not the most knowledgeable person, but from what I know, I think that's more or less true. And it's always hard to know what happened 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But
we weren't there.
seemingly, from what we know, it does seem like it was more merit-based. That it was a question of, can you do the work? What work are you able to do, and we're going to reward, but it wasn't equal because there would still be, you're the top warrior, so you're going to get the best cut of meat.
Oh, yeah.
For example. So there was still kind of a hierarchy, but just by different values than we would now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to avoid the lobster. I'm going to avoid the lobster comment.
The lobster?
Have you heard of Jordan Peterson?
Oh, not really, no.
Have you ever heard his argument for the lobsters?
He says, like click-clack lobsters?
Okay, so this is what he says. He says that hierarchies are natural and trying to overthrow them is unnatural. And he says, like, that's how lobsters work. He compares human society to lobsters.
Interesting.
He's a very funny individual.
Okay.
He's a very funny individual. I agree with him on something. Some things I think he's just out a quack, I mean, what's your take? Do you think hierarchies are natural or unnatural? Because a hierarchy is not necessarily bad, okay?
I guess I think that it does tend to arise in the natural world. Like we see lots of species of animals where hierarchies emerge. But I guess the question would be is just because it's natural doesn't mean it's right. Does that mean we should allow it to exist and not push back? Because as humans we can consciously intervene in our natural desires and impulses. Like think about you might want to murder someone, but we're going to say, no, maybe let's not.
Okay,
right?
I see your point.
Mm-hmm.
My counter argument to you, every organization needs specialization. Like, I'm not the kind of person that thinks we should, like, I think hierarchies keep the human race organized and keep us, like, functioning, And I'm not trying to say, like, I like hierarchies, I'm just saying, like, as an organized society, we need, like, this guy doing this job, that guy doing that job, It's just, like, it's natural,
But could it be more lateral instead
of definitely.
top down?
Definitely. Yeah.
Because I totally agree with that. Like, if you're really great at something, you should do that. And if I'm really great at something, I should do that. But that doesn't mean I'm higher than you or I'm better than you in any way.
Or there is a hierarchy, make it very, like, respectful, very, like, movable, like, very socially, what's the word I'm looking for?
Fluid?
Yeah, socially fluid. If there was a more fluid hierarchy, I'd be completely fine with that. If it was a true meritocracy, I wouldn't mind that, okay?
Or if, like, the people who naturally rose to the quote-unquote top had more responsibility and were more leaders and not, like, obsessed with the power.
Right.
The people on top or the people with more skill, maybe, it should be their responsibility to help and defend and protect the people with less.
Yes, I agree with that. I will say this, now going to the nerd part of this.
Ooh, yay!
So, would you consider... What's your take on the monomyth, modern mythology? Does it give meaning? As a writer, as a person who likes anthropology, what do you have to say about mythology and why it's important to the human condition?
I think mythology serves many purposes. It tells us a lot about ourselves, and I think it's tricky because you write stories for two different reasons, either to reflect the world as it is or to reflect the world as you want it to be. So I think the monomyth demonstrates the world as it is. But I think sometimes we need to push against that to create the world we want, not the world we have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. The monomyth needs to like make sense to the culture it's preaching. Because the monomyth is the most adaptable mythology in human history. Mm-hmm. The monomyth is constantly evolving and changing.
Right, as people change.
Yeah, and it talks about the struggles of order versus chaos. It talks about the struggle of rising against oppressive order and then the ways of the world and defining your own destiny and creating a new path, Mm-hmm. Like you can make the argument like Luke Skywalker and Frodo are great examples of a modern-day monomyth, you know?
The hero's journey.
Like, yeah,
right?
like Star Wars, like, I would even argue we still have massive mythology in our own society, if not more.
Oh,
Star
absolutely.
Wars, Lord of the Rings are all mythologies. They're
Harry
all...
Potter.
They give us hope. They give us meaning. Like the downtrodden rising out of the dark, oppressive order of the universe, you know? What's your take?
I think it's interesting. I don't know if I have a take, but I just am fascinated by how humans gravitate towards certain stories time and time again.
Yeah.
We love the hero's journey. The hero's journey never gets old to us. We see it in Harry Potter, we see it in Lord of the Rings, we see it in Star Wars, right?
And the hero's journey is one of the reasons I believe there's some form of a higher unknown reason the human condition's not all just biological. The fact that we created the monomyth, we didn't create the monomyth, the fact that we have the monomyth in our heads is just proof to me there's something like collective consciousness, force powers out there, you know?
Right. Have you read Joseph Campbell at all?
Yes.
The Hero with 1,000 Faces?
Yeah.
So that was so interesting to me because it's universal. It's worldwide. There are themes that we can find here and across the world.
Right, and for me, you can't explain that scientifically. You can't explain it to me scientifically.
Right.
And I'm not...
Oh, go ahead,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, you want to hear what you want to say.
I was going to say dragons. Like, take dragons. Like, every culture has a form of dragon. They might look different, but they have this character, right?
Space beings coming down from the sky. The Anaki.
Yep.
The Anaki.
Yes.
Every culture has some form of... Right. What's another thing that all cultures have? They all have, like, the soul... Like, the freaking trickster god. The trickster deity.
Absolutely.
Loki,
Yeah.
Coyote, Lucifer, you know?
Absolutely. Pan.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well, when it comes to me, mythology is important, and this is why I hate the freaking Enlightenment. They were trying to destroy mythology.
Right?
They were trying to destroy mythology. They were trying to destroy these meaningful stories. They're trying to destroy whimsy and make everything analytical and scientifically explained.
Basically,
Which
yeah.
I hate that. These stories give you meaning. They give you purpose. They're real because they impact your own mental health.
Yes.
Because you believe in these things, even though they're not physically real, they're real because they have an effect on your choices, you know, your view of reality. What's your take?
I agree completely. Like, that whole thing, just because it's happening in your head or it's not visible does not mean it's real. Because to me, reality is my lived experience.
Yeah.
The thoughts I have, those are real to me. Like, it might not be real to you, but it's real to me. So I have kind of a relative perception of reality.
Yeah. My view is we all believe in, like, some form of higher power because we want something to hope for, you know? Or we believe in, like, there's always going to be, like, the fact that there's, like, concepts like limbo and there's so many similarities between, like, Buddhism and Christianity. It tells me that there's, like, archetypes are pan-cultural, you know?
Yes.
And how they travel. How do you think two cultures separated by 1,000 miles can have such a very similar view of reality, and they've never made contact with each other?
Right. I think that it's just a sign that there is something that unites us all, whether that's a collective conscious, whether it's a frequency, it's part of the third dimension, something. Like, and that's the question. That's what we should be trying to figure out is what is that something that connects us all, especially in a time where we're so divided.
Yeah, I mean, what's your favorite archetype? Mine is the wise sage.
I feel like that's perfect for you. That's definitely going to be you.
Buddha, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, you know, like characters like that. Or the anti-hero, another good one.
Ooh, gosh, how do I compete with the... I feel like it's kind of basic, but just the hero archetype. Like, I love the hero's journey, that you start out as this broken, sheltered person.
Farm boy.
Yeah, maybe because I relate to it so much. I was sheltered, grew up in the middle of nowhere, and then you know, someone or something triggers this great adventure, and then you end up completely transformed. So I love that.
Yeah, well, my favorite character is also the fallen hero. That's another good one.
Ooh, yes. Yes.
What is your fallen hero mythology?
I don't really know. What's yours?
Anakin Skywalker, we're going with modern day stuff, but I would
Yeah.
also say, you know, who's that Greek guy? The guy who killed the freaking Minotaur and he was king of Athens.
I don't remember.
Odysseus. I think that's his name. So
is it Odysseus?
I think
that killed the Minotaur? I don't know.
So here's the thing: Greek
long.
tragedies in general are just some of my favorite like works of fiction.
Yeah.
You know, and closing up with the last two topics for this podcast, how do you what future role do you see mythology going in, and do you think Hollywood is doing a good job with creating modern day mythology?
So I will say, actually, the movies and shows coming out within the last couple years, while not all great, I do feel like they're doing a better job at moving the monomyth forward to be more inclusive.
Oh, yeah.
To have stories about people with different abilities, different identities. So that gives me hope that we're collectively creating a story that everyone can feel they belong in. Yeah.
And also in closing, so when it comes to like anthropology, would you recommend it to someone? And what advice would you give someone who was curious about anthropology and what they can expect, and should they consider it? What's your view?
Yes, I mean, personally, I love anthropology because I love thinking about what it means to be a human. And that's really what anthropology is all about. Culturally, physically, like, what does this crazy human existence actually mean? So that's what I would say on that.
Yeah. Well, Scarlett, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it. It's fun.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time, folks. Till next time, stay sane.